Hey, so good to see you this morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming out on a rainy, pollen-filled Sunday. Are you excited to be at church this morning? Hey, if we have not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Zach Lindsay. I'm the Connection Pastor here at Cornerstone. I just want to welcome you again today. Today's going to be an incredible day. Right after this service downstairs in our youth room, we have got 6 people that are taking their next step in their relationship with Jesus through baptism. Can we celebrate that this morning? So I want to invite you to hang out, come downstairs with us and celebrate as these people continue to build their life on Jesus. But I also want to invite you, if you're here today and you say, you know what, I need to get baptized. I'd like to get baptized. We've got room for you too. So find me, Pastor Colin, Pastor Dan after service and let us know. And we'll be happy to baptize you today as well. Hey, today we get to finish this series, Staying on Course. This has been an incredible series. And we know that when it comes to our relationship with the Lord, it's easy for us to drift off course. We need to be able to recognize those times when we're getting off course so that we can correct and stay on course. We've talked about things like hypocrisy. We've talked about things like indifference and pride and true worship as all being areas in our life where we can get off track. Listen, I love to travel, and one thing's true, that if I'm driving, you can almost bet that I'm going to miss a turn. I'm going to lose my way. I'm going to go out of the way. I'm going to miss my turn. And it's not because I don't have the directions. Anybody else here thankful for Apple Maps? Thank God. That's the only way I got to church this morning, okay, is Apple Maps. It's not because I don't have the directions in front of me. Most of the time, it's because I'm not paying attention. It's because I'm not seeing what's happening around me. I'm distracted. No, I wouldn't ever text and drive or anything like that. But, maybe I miss the turn. Maybe I get off course because I'm not paying attention to what's going on around me. And it's the same in our relationship with God. Sometimes it only would take a minor correction to get back on course. Whenever I miss a turn going somewhere, I can easily correct that if I'll just make the effort to get back on track. If I'll be aware enough to know that I've lost my way, if I'll be aware enough to know that I've gone out of the way here, I can get back on track. But sometimes in our life, even with our relationship with God, life is so busy and there's so many things going on, it's easy for us to get distracted and not realize what is actually taking us off course. We've got to be aware of times that we're drifting. We have to be aware of times that we're getting off course. So today I want to close out this series and talk to you about the dangers of drifting towards isolation. I want you to think for just a minute about a prisoner, somebody that's been sentenced to jail, and they go to jail. They've been isolated from their friends and their family, and maybe then on top of that, they get sentenced to solitary confinement. Right? They are taken away from everybody. They're isolated from everything and everyone, and they're put in solitary confinement. And researchers will tell you that this type of isolation, this type of aloneness can be considered torture. What's the worst thing about prison? It's not the dementors. It's the isolation. Right? It's considered torture. But the crazy thing about it is, even though we can recognize the fact that isolation can be torture, so oftentimes we are choosing isolation for ourselves. Look at the world we live in. We live in this world that is more connected than we have ever been. But as a society, we're more disconnected than we've ever been. March of 1876, Alexander Graham Bell makes the very first telephone call. And in that moment, completely revolutionizes the way that we communicate with one another. And that was 149 years ago. Look how far we've come since then. The ease in which we're able to communicate with one another, really it should take this idea of isolation and it should make it an endangered species. But really what's happened, instead of our ease of communication killing isolation, what it has done is caused isolation to mutate into something that's more subtle and more dangerous, because now we're dealing with this illusion of connection and community that isn't really there. We convince ourselves that maybe just because we communicate with people that we have community. That just because we communicate with people, we have connections. But that's not always the case. Look, I can text somebody all day long. I can email somebody all day long. But at the end of the day, that's nothing more than just a data signal, right? There's no actions, there's no presence, there's no substance to that. It's just a data signal. And we start believing that just because we have so much communication in our lives that we're connected. We have a lot of communication in our life, but we have very little substance in our relationships. So we start believing this lie that communication is connection. Sherry Turkle, she's a psychologist, and she says this. She says, we're lonely, but we're fearful of intimacy. Digital connections and the sociable robot may offer the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. Our networked lives allow us to hide from each other, even as we're tethered to each other. We'd rather text than talk. Come on, anybody? You'd rather text than talk? Don't call me, text me. We expect more from technology and less from each other. And whenever we start expecting less from each other, what happens? We start drifting. We start drifting away from people, and we start drifting towards isolation. Look, when I was growing up, if I needed the answer to something, if I needed to know something, I needed to go ask somebody. If I needed advice, if I needed to understand something, I needed to find somebody that knew the answer. I'd have to go talk to somebody. Crazy, right? But now I don't have to do that. I've got all the answers I'll ever need right at my fingertips. I can Google something. I can ask ChatGPT. I could go through the rest of this life not really having to interact with many people at all if I really, really wanted to. But I want you to know that that was not the design for our lives. We were never designed to be isolated. We were never designed to be lonely. Go back to the beginning of creation. Go back to the beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 1. And you've got God here, and God is creating everything. He's speaking to nothing and creating. And He's creating light and darkness. And He's creating land and water. And He's creating birds and animals and plants and stars and planets. And He's creating all of this stuff. And then He takes a step back and He goes, yeah, this is good. All of this stuff is good. And then at some point during this process, God realizes there's something that's not good. We see right after God creates man, He steps back and He looks at what He's created, and He sees man here with nobody to laugh with, nobody to cry with, nobody to celebrate with. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, He says, it is not good that man should be alone. It's not good. And right after this, we see that God creates Eve, and He creates Adam a partner. And a lot of times I think we relate Genesis 2:18 with marriage, but I think this is more than a marriage verse. I think this is a verse about relationship and community. There may be some of you here, you've said something maybe recently in the past. You said, you know what, I don't need other people. I'm really not a people person anyway. I don't need community. I don't need friends. I don't need any of that. You know what? It's just going to be me and God. Me and God, that's all I need, and we're going to be okay. God's going to get me through it. Just me and God. Some of you have told yourself that that's all you need. But apparently not. Apparently just you and God is not enough. Look, I didn't say that. God said that. God said that it's not good for man to be alone. You've got Adam, who has a very intimate relationship with God, a relationship with God that's probably closer than any relationship than you or I will ever have with God. They spent time together in a way that we have not experienced. They would walk together in the garden, is what it says. But yet God looks at this man He's created, a man that He's created in His own image, and He says, you know what? It's not enough. You were created for more. You were created for community. And we see this idea all throughout the Bible that community is this biblical concept. But even more than just a biblical concept, it's psychological, and it's just common sense. It's not good for you to be alone. And let me tell you how not good it is. If you find yourself today alone, if you find yourself today drifting towards isolation, I want you to know that you're actually affecting your anxiety. Your anxiety is higher when you are alone. And the reason is because your mind, your brain is constantly scanning your surroundings for threats, for things that would do you harm, for people and situations that are a threat to you. And when you find yourself alone, when you find yourself isolated, your body ramps up that threat detection. And because your brain knows that you're alone, it recognizes this critical fact that you don't have anybody else to rely on. And when you find yourself in that situation, your anxiety skyrockets. I want us to look today at Psalms 142. And the heading of this psalm in your Bible, if you see, it's going to give you a little context as to what's going on. The heading says this: a psalm of David regarding his experience in the cave. Now, just the idea of a cave does not scream community to me, right? That screams loneliness to me. That's not a place that I'm going to go looking for people. A cave is not a place that I'm going to go trying to find community. I don't go hang out in caves. Anybody do that? If you do, that's fine. I mean, you do you, but that's not a place that you're going to be able to find much community. Psalms 142 comes from this time in David's life where he's running from King Saul. Saul has tried to kill him. He's throwing spears at him. And David has run away, and he has literally run to this dark cave. And he's probably in this moment thinking about all those people in his life that have said at one time or another, hey, I've got your back. I'm going to be there. Hey, in your toughest times, I'm going to be right there for you. But yet here's David in this dark place, all alone. And he writes about it in Psalms 142. We're going to read the whole thing. It's 7 verses. And it says this: I cry out to the Lord. I plead for the Lord's mercy. I pour out my complaints before him and tell him all my troubles. When I'm overwhelmed, you alone know the way I should turn. Wherever I go, my enemies have set traps for me. I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me a passing thought. No one will help me. No one cares a bit what happens to me. Then I pray to you, O Lord. I say, you are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. Hear my cry, for I am very low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. Here's David in a dark place, afraid for his life. Somebody's trying to kill him. He's crying out to God. He's kind of complaining a little bit, if we're honest. He's telling God about all the bad things that have happened. He's telling God about how lonely he is, how people have tried to trap him, how people don't care about him. And in this moment, David has a choice to make. He can choose to be bitter and drift towards isolation. David could have probably chosen to live the rest of his days out in that cave. David was pretty resourceful. He probably could have figured out how to make it happen. But he doesn't do that. Look at what his response is in verse 7. After he's talked so much about everything that has gone wrong in his life, everything that's going wrong in this present situation, he calls out to God and he says, God, get me out of here. Get me out of this prison. I don't want to be lonely anymore. I don't want to be in this place anymore. Get me out of here. And God, when you do, I know that you're going to do that, but I also believe that when you bring me out of this, you're going to put the right people around me in my life. Because of that, we could look over in 1 Samuel chapter 22 and we can read the full story of what happens here. And we find that while David is in this cave, God brings his family to him. God brings over 400 people to David. And David has this community suddenly to help him during his time of trouble. I want you to understand that being lonely, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. We all go through times in our life of being lonely. But it's your response in that loneliness that will make all the difference. Will you drift towards isolation, or will you drift towards community? Even Jesus in Matthew 26, Jesus on the night that he's betrayed, he's going to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. He doesn't want to go by himself. He asks his 3 closest disciples. He asks his 3 closest friends, Peter, James, and John. He says, guys, will you go with me? I need to go pray, and things are pretty heavy right now. There's a lot going on in my life, and I really would like to have somebody there with me. Look, I know you guys are probably going to fall asleep. I know you're not really going to be there for me, but just having you there present in that moment means a lot to me. On Jesus' worst day, he needed people. Let that sink in for a minute. Jesus needed people. If Jesus needed people, I promise you, we need people. If you're fighting against loneliness today, it's okay. But what is your response going to be? Will you drift towards isolation, or will you get connected to community? I think there's three main reasons why we drift towards isolation. And the first reason is this: it's selfishness. We drift towards isolation and loneliness because of selfishness. Proverbs 18:1 really hits on this. It says, unfriendly people care only about themselves. They lash out at common sense. Scripture here is making this connection between isolation and unfriendliness and selfishness. And it's like you can't have one without the other, and you can't be one without being the other. If you stay isolated long enough, you're going to become unfriendly. If you stay isolated long enough, you're going to become selfish. And that's why some of us drift towards isolation, because we know that with community comes accountability. And if I have to be accountable to somebody, if I have to be accountable for my actions, maybe I'm just going to do things on my own, because that's uncomfortable and I don't want that. But that choice to be isolated, that choice to live a lonely life of isolation is causing us to live a life that we weren't created for. We drift towards isolation because of selfishness. The next reason we drift towards isolation is because of past experiences. You know, I've had friends before, and they've stabbed me in the back. They've done me wrong. They've not been there when they said they would. I tried life groups once, and I went, and so-and-so said something that hurt my feelings, or so-and-so didn't even talk to me, so I can't be part of that. We convince ourselves that because of past bad experience with relationships and community that we can't be part of anything anymore, that we can't be connected to anything anymore, so we drift towards isolation. Let me ask you a question, though. Anybody here ever had a bad experience at a restaurant? Maybe you got food poisoning. That's fun, right? Maybe you had bad service. Maybe you just had bad food. Did you ever go, you know what? I'm just never eating again. I'm just done. I'm never eating again. Forget it. I'm done. No, because you know the truth is you're going to get hungry again. You're going to have something to satisfy your hunger. Now, you get hungry again, it doesn't mean you have to go back to that same restaurant, right? It doesn't mean you have to go eat that same type of food. You're still going to get hungry. You're still going to have to satisfy that need. It's the same with our relationships from people. We can't let past bad experiences keep us from living the life that God designed us to live. Just because you have a bad experience with people doesn't mean you can't go find new people. You can't go find new community. If you keep having the same bad experiences with the same people, maybe it's time for you to find a new community. Don't let past experiences ever keep you from being connected again. See, you were designed for relationships, and the enemy knows that. The enemy knows that you are better when you're doing life with other people. He wants you, it's his intention for you to live outside of your design. He wants you living in a place that you are not good. And God says you are not good when you are alone. So he reminds you constantly of the hurt that past relationships have caused you. The enemy wants you alone because he knows that you are most vulnerable when you are alone. Last reason we drift towards isolation. First, it's selfishness and it's past experiences. But the last reason we drift towards isolation is busyness. Anybody busy in here? We're all busy, right? I got so much going on. I got everything going on at the office. I got to take care of this. We got to get the kids over here to this practice, and I've got to go here, and I've got to get there. I really just don't have time for anybody else or anything else in my life. But that's not us, right? That's not us. We're not too busy because we made time to be here today. We made time to be in church today. And some of us think that just because we're in church, that we're not isolated. I want you to know this morning that you can be in the building and still not be in community. You can be here this morning, but you're still not in community, because the relationships, the community that I'm talking about is much more than just what's contained inside these four walls. It extends outside of here. It's the relationships that Galatians is talking about when it talks about bearing one another's burdens. It's doing life together outside of just a Sunday morning experience. Look at Acts chapter 2, verse 46 and 47. We're looking here at the very beginning of the early church. And it says how they would meet together every day. They'd meet together every day, and they would break bread together, and they would eat together. It says, with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. Look, this wasn't just about being near somebody. It was more than just sitting next to somebody on a Sunday morning. This was emotional and relational unity that they are experiencing. But do you know why they gathered together so often? It's because they needed each other. They needed each other in their lives. They were going through it, right? Their lives were tough. It's not like the way we live today, right? They were getting persecuted, right? They were stressed. They were trying to figure out how to make ends meet. They were trying to figure out how to live for God in a world that wasn't living for God. Nothing like what we're dealing with, right? But see, there's this fundamental difference between first century Christians and us today. The difference is this, is that first century Christians desperately needed each other, and they knew it. We today, we desperately need each other, and we forgot it. Look, so many of us are choosing isolation, and we're choosing loneliness. But not only are we choosing it, we're valuing it. We put a value on being alone. We want less interaction. We want limited accountability, right? We're choosing shopping online. We're choosing working online. We're choosing ordering our food online. Contactless delivery, anybody? Right? I don't even want to look at the person that's bringing me my food. I think sometimes we start drifting towards isolation because we believe it's more convenient. It's easier for us. And it's unintentional sometimes. We start drifting towards isolation just out of convenience. We've started to build and create this life around us that we were never made for. If you're here today and you're starting to realize that maybe you're drifting towards isolation, I want to give you 3 really easy, quick ways for you to turn back towards community. The first one is this: it's start serving. If you're here today and you don't have a community, and maybe you're part of the Cornerstone family, but you don't really feel like you're connecting, start serving. You just need to be around people. And there's so many opportunities for you to do that. You can be an usher, you can be a greeter, you can work on safety team, media team. Maybe you can work in the kids wing. But you just need to be around people that are walking the same direction as you. If that's you this morning, you say, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great way for me to get connected. If you want to start serving, take that connection card and just write on that connection card an area that you'd like to serve. Maybe you don't know where you'd like to serve. Just write the word serve on there. We'll come to you. We'll find a place that you can get connected. Start serving. The second way for you to get connected, join a life group. Join a life group. You need to be meeting consistently with people that are going to encourage you. You need to be meeting with people consistently that are going to hold you accountable. Join a life group. I'm not asking you to meet every day like the people did in Acts. We're talking about every 2 weeks. Listen, we had such a tremendous response for life groups this semester. We had over 230 people sign up for life groups. What that tells me is that Cornerstone is hungry for connections. It tells me that Cornerstone is hungry for community. If that's you today and you're not in a life group, talk to me. I know a guy that can get you connected. I can get you in, I promise you. The third way that you can get connected and turn towards community, and this is kind of a cheat code and you may not even realize it. The third way is join the church. Maybe you've been at Cornerstone for a long time and you've never taken that step to join the church, or maybe you've been here for just a little while. Join the church. It's not, you hear us talking about Discover Cornerstone and this class that you can go to join the church, find out more about Cornerstone. But what does that even mean? What's it mean to be a member here? Well, first thing I'll tell you, it's not like a gym membership. It's not going to cost you anything, okay? There's no like monthly fee. There's no subscription, nothing like that. But the reason this is a cheat code is because when you join the church, when you join Cornerstone, you're immediately connected. You get connected immediately to a deacon. We've got an incredible group of deacons here at Cornerstone, and their job is to connect with you. Their job is to follow up with you. Their job is to pray for you and to make sure that you have a connection point. Those are three really easy ways for you to stop drifting towards isolation and move towards community. If we want to avoid that drift, we have to choose and embrace community. See, community is this place of healing that somehow God meets your needs and winds up healing you through other people. And that's what James is talking about in James 5:16. He says, confess your sins to each other. Right? That's the tough part, right? That's the tough part about community, is that accountability piece. I don't want to tell my business to other people. I don't want that in my life. It's easier if I can just tell God. And that's okay too. That's what we're supposed to do. 1 John 1:9 says, if you confess your sins to God, he is faithful. And he's just and will forgive your sins and will cleanse you of all unrighteousness. James says, yes, do that. But I'm going to give you the other side of that coin too. Confess your sins to others so that you can pray for each other so that you may be healed. It says the prayer of the righteous person is powerful and it's effective. The reason this is so powerful and effective is because it does just that. It creates accountability in your life. If there's an area of your life that you struggle in consistently, find somebody that can hold you accountable. And I'm not talking about just anybody. It needs to be somebody that you can trust, somebody that's going to lift you up, somebody that's going to pray for you, somebody that's going to encourage you. Listen, maybe you're here today and maybe you're not lonely. Maybe you got all the community that you need. And you're thinking, you know what, I could have just slept in. I could have avoided the rivers of pollen in the parking lot. I could have just stayed at home because this message really isn't for me. I want you to know it is for you. Because if you're connected to community, if you're in community with other people and you're not lonely and you're not isolated, I want to challenge you today to help create community for other people. Help create opportunities for people to get connected. And that may be a couple of different ways. Here's a few. You could lead a life group. I told you we had over 230 people sign up for life groups. You know what that means? We're about maxed out on space. I believe we're going to need more life groups next semester. That means we're going to need more leaders next semester. Maybe in your life you've been in this cave of loneliness and you know what that was like, but you know what it's like now to be in community. Help create that for other people. Maybe you're not ready to lead a life group. Open your home and host a life group. Maybe it's as easy as saying, hey, Zach, I will help you this summer with co-ed church softball. And you think, what? Softball? What are you talking about that? Because it's a place where relationships have been developed. It's a place where friendships have been formed and community has started through us playing softball in the summertime. It's a place of connection. So I want to challenge you today, if you're in community, I want you to start helping create community. Look, we weren't ever created to carry burdens on our own. God knew from the very beginning that community was vital. He knew it was vital. He said it's not good for you to be alone. Dan has asked this question a few times during this series. What do you do when you hit the rumble strips? What do you do when you get off course? What do I do when I'm driving down the interstate and I hit those rumble strips on the side of the road? Well, the truth is, I don't have to do anything. I could continue to drive right there. Probably going to tear my car up. Probably not going to get where I'm going as fast as I'd like to. Maybe I may not even make it to where I'm going. But if I continue to do that day in and day out, at some point I'm going to get used to it. At some point I'm not going to notice it as much anymore. I'm going to get comfortable. The goal is for me to make the correction, to make the adjustment as soon as I hit those rumble strips. I don't need to get conditioned to being in a place of loneliness. I don't need to get conditioned to being in a place of isolation. And let me tell you, I've been in a place of isolation. I've been in a place of loneliness. From age 9 to 18, I would say I was isolated. I was a lonely person. I had friends, and I'm so thankful for them. A lot of them are still great friends to this day. But I didn't have a true community of people around me. I didn't know what it was like for somebody else to help carry my burdens. I didn't know how bad I needed that. I had decided that I just wasn't a people person, and I didn't need that. It wasn't for me. But I can even tell you this, in the last 5 years of being at Cornerstone, and it's crazy to me that it's been 5 years and that y'all have let me hang out with you for the last 5 years. Man, I've been through some stuff. My family has been through some stuff. And I could have very easily drifted towards isolation. And I could have very easily said, God, you know what? It's just me and you. You got to see me through this. And I might have been okay. I probably would have made it through it. But let me tell you what made it easier. What made it easier to get through those seasons of loneliness, made it easier for me to get through those seasons of difficulty was you. It's the community that I've been able to develop here at Cornerstone. It's the fact that I know that I can come here and I've got people around me that are going to pray for me, that they're going to encourage me, that they're going to be there for me on my worst day. I didn't know how much I needed community for a long time. Burdens in our life can get so much heavier when we're trying to carry them on our own. We were never designed to operate that way. But here's the thing, and this is the thing about every other thing we've talked about in this series, whether it's pride, indifference, hypocrisy, wrong motivations, any of those things. They're all things that I have to recognize in my life, and they're all things that I have to make a change. I have to correct. I have to get back on course. I can pray and I can say, God, just like David, I can cry out to God and say, you know what, God, you're my refuge, but I'm so lonely. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and not be lonely. Right? I've got to make an effort to move towards community. I've got to make an effort to get things back on track. So what are those rumble strips in your life? Maybe it's hypocrisy. Maybe it's some sin that you're dealing with. Maybe it's isolation. Maybe it's pride. Any of the things that we've covered in this series. They're all things that you can take to God. They're all things that you can ask for His strength and His guidance. But they take you making an effort